Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in. Welcome into another episode of the podcast, listeners. I'm excited to be here with you again today, although I'm going to admit to you that I am very frustrated right now because I literally just recorded this entire episode and then realized my microphone wasn't working and I lost all the audio and I had to start all over again. So I'm so annoyed. But it's an important enough topic. It is worth having the tenacity to record a second time and deliver this stuff to you. So what I'm going to be talking about today is actually building off of something I started talking to you about a few episodes ago, which was this idea of being in a relationship with a fantasy. And if you listen to that podcast episode, I talked about like how most of the pain that we experience in life is found in this gap between how we wish things were and how they really were. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I think probably it'd be great to listen to it before you listen to this episode. So go back a few clicks and listen to that first. But what I'm going to talk about today is taking that concept a little bit deeper. So I have been talking about this idea with a lot of my clients recently. It's something that I've been applying to my own work recently. And often when I bring it up to people, they say, gosh, I don't think I'm just having a relationship with like a fantasy life. Like, oh, I wish, a relationship I have with fantasy sometimes right now is, I wish that it were like 5 years from now when Mike and I are empty nesters, because I really want to be able to travel more, so that would be me having a relationship with like a fantasy that doesn't exist. Like that's not the reality. We can't travel all the time right now because we do have kids at home and all that stuff. But I've experienced pain because I have created this like deep, intimate, heartfelt, connected relationship with a fantasy that doesn't exist. And I am sad. I'm feeling pain because my life doesn't actually look like this fantasy that I've created. Well, when I've been talking about this with a lot of people, they're saying, gosh, I don't think I just have a fantasy relationship with like a different circumstance. I think I have a relationship with a fantasy of myself, a relationship with fantasy me. And when the first person said that to me, I was like, yes, damn, we all are doing this to a certain degree. And it brought up so much stuff for me. So I want to give you my confession for today, like an example from my real life about how, this has looked for me. So I've been doing a lot of my own work for many, many, many years. I do internal family systems work for my own self-growth work. I use the Enneagram, as everybody knows. I've been in therapy and coaching and all this stuff. And at this point in my relationship with myself, I'm starting to get to a place where like I am able to just have a relationship with my true self, not my fantasy self, and feel really accepting of who I am, not who I wish I were. So maybe like a year or two ago, I was having an argument with my husband, Mike. Don't even remember what we were arguing about. But at one point in the conversation, he was like, you just suck at taking criticism. Like, you can't take it. Like, when I have criticism for you, you just can't handle it. And, probably for the first time in our relationship, when he said that to me, I was just like, correct. I don't do well with criticism. So why do you keep criticizing me? Like, that it doesn't go well. Like, that I can't take it. That it's really hard for me to handle it. And it actually turned into like a sort of funny sort of dispelling of our argument in the moment, because I was like, yeah, exactly. I don't take criticism well, but you insist after 20 years of marriage on keeping criticizing me. What's up with that? I'm like, you can keep criticizing me for the rest of your life if you want to. I am not able to receive information that way. It's not helpful to me. Like, you're not doing anything helpful with that, but you certainly can keep criticizing me, or you can realize that, like, that's just not going to work well for me and choose not to do that anymore. But there's not a plan C where all of a sudden I'm a different wife, where I love criticism and really appreciate it when you give it to me. That person doesn't exist. So Mike is having his own like relationship with a fantasy version of me. But for me, that was an example of me not having a relationship with a fantasy self instead of the way I used to react to stuff like that, which would have been to be like super defensive or to beat myself up for not, being calmer when someone says something upsetting to me, or being upset at all when somebody, you know, criticizes me. Like, I wish that it didn't bother me when people criticize me. I wish that Mike could give me all that feedback and it wouldn't bother me, but it does bother me. You know, in the past, I wouldn't have responded well to him saying that, which we don't even need to go into the meta world of the fact that in saying that I can't take criticism, he was criticizing me. But for the first time, when we've had this dynamic, I was just able to be like, yep, I don't take criticism well. So it's kind of interesting that you continue to criticize me, but zero, like, shame about the fact that I don't do well with criticism, that that's not the way I, grow. Zero attempt to pretend that that's not true about myself. Like, I finally was in a relationship with my true self in that moment. And to be in a relationship with my true self in the heat of an argument with someone is a huge accomplishment for me. And that's kind of like, so is this a confession? Well, kind of. I mean, I feel like a bit of that confession energy when I tell you all, I don't do really well with criticism. But at the same time, it's a little bit of a humble brag. Like, I'm really proud that I was able to show up in that conversation and say, like, yep, I don't take criticism well. So why are you doing that? It's not for me, because you know that it doesn't help me and I don't enjoy it and all that stuff. So what's going on? I was really proud of myself to be able to do that. So that's kind of brings me to something that I think is super powerful about shifting into this idea about relationships with fantasy. I think it's really intrinsic in the self-help world that I embody like practically all the time, whether I'm doing my own self-work or I'm working with my clients in my own career, all of those things. Like, I obviously am steeped in this world of self-improvement, self-growth, etc. But what can be really insidious in this world is that kind of toxic positivity where it's like there's an ideal that we're supposed to be, and you're not supposed to be different than that. So if you are, it's a sign of shortcoming on your part. You haven't done enough work. You're not where you're supposed to be yet. We have this kind of idea that self-growth work is about changing ourselves. It's about being better than who we are right now. It's about getting to the point where we are the person we're supposed to be. And the way that we often look at doing that is by trying to eradicate or fix the parts of us that we see as character flaws. I just had a session with a client who she has a part of herself that is really loves planning and organizing and achieving and things like that. And we started the session. She started by saying, I'm really trying to move away from that part of myself. Like, I don't want to be like that anymore. She naturally has this idea that like that part of her is bad. It's hurting her. It's sabotaging her. And so the solution is for that part to, go F off, basically. And that to me is how a lot of people look at self-growth work. It's, these are my flaws, these are my weaknesses. I'm supposed to either fix those flaws or strengthen those weaknesses. I need to be different than who I am to be the person I'm supposed to be the parent I'm supposed to be the, wife I'm supposed to be. And, shifting from that idea of like, here's the fantasy of who I'm supposed to be. And I have a very intimate, connected, like deep, almost spiritual connection with that imaginary thing instead of that deep, intimate, spiritual connection with a real thing, which is who I am right now. There is no other Anne than the Anne that is sitting right here. The potential Anne that I could be someday doesn't exist. That's a fantasy person. And I spend so much more of my time, or I used to spend so much more of my time in communion with that fantasy person than I did in communion with my true authentic self, the self that is sitting here today recording this podcast episode. And so shifting into relationship with your true self instead of relationship with your fantasy self is the shift away from I'm not good enough yet, I need to change, these are the parts I need to fix, or as my client said this morning, I need to move away from these aspects of myself into a situation of acceptance and eventually embracing who you are as perfectly whole, not broken, not needing to be fixed, etc. And there's levels of this kind of acceptance, right? So here's another example. I had another fight between me and my where we were on a family vacation together. And earlier in the vacation, I had said something about, you seem distant, babe. And he's like, I feel distant. I don't know what's going on with me, but something's going on with me. And I'm just feeling really disconnected and removed. And I can't really explain it, but I'm in it somehow. There's something's going on with me. And that was the conversation. I was like, okay, well, cool. We'll figure it out, whatever. And, we went on with our time. But, when Mike's in it, when he's distant, when he's disconnected, that's kind of stinks. We're on a family vacation, but he's off in the clouds. And that leaves me to do all the terrestrial things like get us from point A to point B and organize things and make plans and all of that stuff. And, also we're supposed to be trying to be together. And so that kind of stinks. And so a couple days into the vacation, I said, this kind of sucks. And he got very defensive and angry with me. And, what happened was he was coming to grips with not just the fact that he's in this moment where he was really removed and distant and going through something, and then that was okay, but that also going through that and being distant, et cetera, affected the people around him. And I think that's the piece that we come up against when we're trying to do this self-acceptance work, is accepting the part about that whole shtick that means we are hurting people. So the fact that I can't take criticism is hurtful to Mike. And of course, we could have a whole nother podcast episode about how it shouldn't be hurtful to him or whatever, but it is. The Mike that I am in relationship today has a really strong belief that part of his job as my partner is to alert me to things that I'm doing that could be problematic down the road. That's why he criticizes me. And I can't receive that from him. And that causes him pain. It makes him feel like he's not doing right by me. And he's not protecting the person that he loves the most on this world. And he's not helping me, which is his number one core value. And so the fact that I can't take criticism isn't something that I just have to accept about myself. I also have to accept that by not taking criticism, I'm creating hardship for the people I love. There are ripple effects to the people that we are. And if we really want to accept ourselves and truly be in a healthy, healed relationship with the present, this very moment version of ourselves, there is no other Anne except the Anne that is right here in this moment. That means that I have to accept that the Anne that's in this moment is enough. There's nothing wrong with her. She is who she is, and she has these aspects to herself, and that hurts people. And that last bit is the part that we have a hardest time with. And especially in our parenting, hearing from my kids, I had a conversation with one of my sons a long time ago where he's like, why whenever we get in an argument, you get so intense and you just you have to, win the argument and you have to express yourself and you have to be, you get so aggressive. That was the word he used. You get so aggressive in argument. And I simultaneously saw, well, first of all, that he's correct. I do get very aggressive in arguments because I get super passionate and animated and intense. It's not necessarily that I have to win, but I really have to be heard. And I really need to get on my soapbox and express myself. So I simultaneously was able to see in that conversation, well, first of all, he's right. And second of all, that hurts him. And third of all, it's not going to change. I am going to be this way. I will always be who I am. And one of my son's jobs in his own personal growth is getting over the fact that his mom has this one aspect to her personality that is challenging and problematic for him. Accepting that I am problematic for my children, to me, was like a whole next level of this idea of acceptance. I am problematic to my husband. I am problematic to my children. Me being me creates hardship for the people who are connected to me. Of course, it also creates beautiful magic and wonderful everything as well. But I also create hardship for the people that I love. And that's never going to change. And the solution to that is not to not have those hard, challenging aspects to myself. And to go even further, it's silly to even talk about a solution to that because it's not a problem. There is no solution and there needs no solution. That level of acceptance, that shift from I'm going to live in that gap, that pain gap between who I am or what is versus what I wish it were, or who I wish I were, or who I think I should be, or who I think I could be, or what this situation could be. Living in that gap creates so much pain, and it creates a focus of lack. It creates a focus of I have to change myself, fix myself, eradicate these parts of myself, move away from these aspects of myself. And if we can change our focus in our self-work from living in that gap, that pain gap, to accepting who we really are, being in a relationship with our true selves instead of our fantasy self, that's where magic happens. And the craziest thing, like of all the cosmic jokes that exist in the world, the biggest cosmic joke is that making that shift, moving entirely away from trying to be other than who I am, or trying to make this situation other than what it is the single most powerful thing I could do to create the person I could be, the situation that could be, the change, the up leveling, the moving closer to that fantasy. It only happens when I'm only in relationship with myself. There is no other, if I'm talking to whatever, my kid, there's no other Elijah than the Elijah in front of me. The Elijah he could be doesn't exist. The Elijah he used to be doesn't exist. There is no other Elijah. And if I can attune to that, all of a sudden I can be a great parent. And all of a sudden I can show up in ways that help him become that potential that I could have been having a relationship with and sabotaging. By not having a relationship with who he could be, I help him become who he could be. And the same is true for myself. If there is no other Anne than who I am, by living in that way, by being in this place of like, yep, I don't take criticism well, that's just who I am, it sucks for you, not in a hey, go screw yourself, tough titties kind of way, in an actual like, no, I get that really sucks for you. I can see that you're in pain because of this thing about me. And I love you so much. And I wish that you weren't in pain. If I can be that way, treating myself that way, having as much compassion for myself, I see why I am this way. I'm okay with the fact that I am this way. It's not something I need to fix. I love myself this way. And I love my husband and I have compassion for him at the same time. Living in that way makes it 10 times more likely that later on I might actually be better at taking criticism. And to go back to that like meta space of like he was criticizing me by telling me that I couldn't take criticism, the fact that I just said, yeah, I really don't take criticism well, it's kind of silly that you keep criticizing me since that's like a thing about myself. That was me taking criticism well. And I took that criticism well because I was in total acceptance of the fact that I don't take criticism well. It's so meta, it's so brain breaking. Like I said, it's the biggest cosmic joke of all cosmic jokes, is that the more we give up our attachment to fantasy, the more that fantasy becomes reality. That is the biggest joke of all. So in summary, with all of this stuff, like we get to shift from this idea that our work is to become the fantasy into the idea that our work is to be in relationship with the truth. If you can be in relationship with the truth, this present moment, the truth of who you really are, everything changes. It is like the world explodes and opens up for you. And I see it happen all of the time with my clients. This is the kind of work that I do with them. And like literally today with that client who came to session saying, I'm really trying to distance myself from this part of me. We did this IFS work. We did some internal family systems work, and we started to realize like, oh, this really is a part of me, the part of me that likes to achieve and always have a plan and be really like on top of it. And I don't have to get rid of that part of me. I don't need to scold that part of me or beat it into submission or distance myself from it. I can be curious about it. I can accept it. I can be welcoming of it. I can have compassion toward it, all of those things. And in so doing, that part becomes a superpower because it's a healthy part that I'm in a healthy relationship with, instead of a part that is so triggered and activated that it's kind of sabotaging my life. And that's why I love IFS. You heard me a couple sessions ago talk about what is IFS, what is internal family systems, and the dovetail between the Enneagram and IFS, which I'm going to talk about more in a future podcast. But right now, just to say, like, the Enneagram talks about all these levels of integration. IFS gives us an actual way to reach those higher levels of integration. And both of those paradigms are based on the idea that we have no bad parts, that the path forward is that full integration, that full acceptance, that full embrace of all of ourselves. And doing that is a huge game changer. So if all of this stuff is intriguing to you, if you're thinking like, holy cow, this is awesome. If you're thinking this is the kind of coaching that I want to do, it's not just about how do I get my kid to eat broccoli, but also why do I care if my kid eats broccoli? And what is broccoli? Not to get too, I'm just kidding. We don't need to go into the whole spiritual esoteric aspect of things, but this is the kind of work I do with my clients. You absolutely do get those tools and ability to set containers and boundaries and enforce those with your kids so that they eat their broccoli, for example, or whatever it is. But also very quickly in our work, usually around like month 3-ish or later, we are transitioning into some of these way deeper self-growth concepts that just take everything that we are working on and take it to the whole next level. So if that's intriguing to you, if this kind of work is what you're looking for, you want the broccoli stuff and you want the esoteric meaning of life stuff, you want to figure out how to do right by your kid and also figure out how to be, this next level of yourself, you might be the perfect client for me, and I might be the perfect coach for you. And the only way for us to know for sure is to meet for one of those wonderful free discovery calls you hear me talk about every week on the podcast. Set it up. The link is in the show notes. You have that ability to meet with me, tell me your story, share all your struggles, maybe introduce me to a couple of your parts, whether you know you're doing that or not. And hear some really honest, direct feedback from me as well about what I see is happening right now, what we could work on together and what that looks like. So if that sounds good to you, I can't wait to see your name pop up on my calendar, and I can't wait to talk to you all again next week on another episode of the podcast. Bye, everybody. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.